So with that, if we're going to look at, what resources do we need? So what is that right size fit? The problem, of course, is there's no one size fits all approach for every organization in terms of budgeting or sustainability at large. You really need to think about a whole number of things in terms of resourcing there. And I think you already flagged, Jess, quite a few areas there where, there are organizations that have teams in place. If you think about headcount, or organizations that have never touched this area and they're really starting to worry now, do I need to hire one person, a team? Do I need to look at consultants rather than headcount? Do I just get a platform, technology that will do it all? Is it a mix of that? And I think most importantly, what level of training and development do I need to upskill, build that internal capability and capacity there? There's a lot of considerations here, but mostly I think a lot of people wonder about that, the headcount. Who do I need in my team? Where do they sit? Do I need a dedicated resource? Like, there's all these questions. Do you have any kind of real world insights of how people deal with that struggle around resourcing headcount to at large for sustainability or for climate and carbon in particular?
Yeah, so I can speak to kind of what I did as a bit of a strategy when I was the commercial manager inside a mining organization where we were starting to think about sustainability and supply chain. I tried to plant people in the teams that would be my best friends, where I thought it would be a more compelling case for them to get headcount and take on some of this work. So I think getting budget in some organizations is almost like pitching or selling your ideas. So my pitch used to be, and I think it's probably stronger now, is to say, I know that if we have a project team on sustainability, I'm going to be heavily, heavily questioned if I say I need just pure sustainability reporting manager. And in some ways that can end up starting this whole conversation that can be quite negatively framed to say, well, what are we going to do with this data? Is it all about accounting and reporting? What's the point? It can open the kettle of fish, if you will, on a narrative that I don't think is overly positive. What I did would say, well, this particular piece that's becoming mandatory, particularly when I'm thinking about a 2025 budget, rather than saying, oh, we need to start at ground zero and we need to figure out where all this data sits and it's super overwhelming to report on ESG and we need to hire someone into this team. Another option is to say, well, this needs to be auditable, it needs to be robust, and we now have an accounting standard. So my suggestion is that we do have another resource that we might need if the finance and reporting team is already saying we're at capacity, then working with that manager to say, look, there is going to be overlap. I know this is going to be new to your team, but you're going to have access to so much more data than, in some ways, what we do, particularly on an emissions inputs sense. You guys already know standards, and getting someone in here that's excited by this new wave of accounting and is bringing data to the surface for the company that I can use in the sustainability team to build strategy and to make next decisions, that could be a really compelling case, particularly if you're saying that there might be some capacity for that person to help out the finance team in more than just reporting after, say, the first 12 months when they've got all the systems and processes set up. So in my experience, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong, and I certainly think a lot of sustainability teams tend to be somewhat undervalued in my experience in organizations, but thinking about where the headcount should sit and how you can essentially benefit from them being in those integrated departments, it's potentially something to think about.
And I really like that. So to me, that is really a good example of running in your organization. Sustainability is an embedded function. So sustainability is not a project team. So it's not the two desks in the corner there with a head of sustainability and an ESG reporting person, and everything gets dumped on their desk and it's their problem now. And that's where the discussion ends. It's about, well, like with finance, if you think about it, every department's got a budget, got a cost center, got budget lines. They need to be across that. They need to check that. They are responsible to talk to finance, to the CFO about how they run their budget. So think about carbon in the same way. Think about sustainability at large in a similar way. It is cross-functional. It is across the business. And I think that's the key there. If you embed the right resources, or if you train, use that training and development, use budget there to get critical people across different departments skilled up and trained into, in particular, about carbon. What do I need to do? But work out what else is material in your business from a sustainability point of view and get the right people onto that. You might still need someone in that sustainability function to operate a bit of as an orchestrator to make sure that everyone is, all the data comes together, everyone knows what they're doing. But you don't need a massive sustainability team and run it as a siloed operation, because you're not really getting there in the end often. In terms of technology, what role does that play? So we spoke a little bit about headcount. Training and development, I think, is a real key there. And maybe that links also into technology. But where's that role for technology? Because what we see is that a lot of people do complain about the spreadsheets. Sustainability is still heavily kind of driven, I think, by spreadsheets in terms of whether it be carbon accounting or anything else in that matter. People build spreadsheets or get consultants to build it for them, and they might have a massive one or hundreds of them, and they lose track and sight and struggle with it. What's the role of technology going forward?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think particularly in the GHG space, I think traditionally, or still now actually, a lot of the time when we think about implementing technology, I think everyone's first shortcut in their mind is we need a dashboard and we need a magic API that pulls in all of the data that we might need to report into a dashboard. And if you have that conversation with anyone that's in IT or even management accounting or finance, in most organizations, and this was certainly my experience in mining, that is definitely something that everyone wants, but in some ways that can be a little bit red flaggy for the organization, because we've tried 1,000 times to make this like a perfect integration. There tend to be steps involved in really working out exactly what we need and how we want that to flow. And often can be a bit of a wild goose chase if it's up to the sustainability team to just kind of try and orchestrate all of that. Whereas a lot of the time there are existing systems that host some data, and it's about how do we unearth that for better decisions. So when I think about asking for budget on technology, the first thing that I'm often saying, and we spend a very long time in spreadsheets, so this isn't really coming from a point of view that they're the worst thing in the world. You can get a long way. But as this starts to become compliance, one of the things that I would be saying to management is, if you want us to do this in spreadsheets, you want all inputs to come into spreadsheets. You want all emission factors, which is the input that gives us the average amount of carbon associated with spend, kilowatt hours, gallons, liters, anything that we're inputting into this business. If you want us to do all of that in spreadsheets, then there is a flip side of that if you get third-party assurance on any of this, or if you start putting those numbers up to the board or the committee, and they start saying, well, where is the granular breakdown on this? Or where did that source data come from? And at what point in time? Did you apply CPI? Was there an FX methodology in this? It's not just do it in spreadsheets and get it done now. It's the spotlight is coming on that, and do the spreadsheets and the human error that can be involved in that process. Does that add cost when it comes to review, when it comes to actually breaking this down and responding to those new questions? So the kind of pitch again of, I can save costs when it comes to third parties reviewing this, or when it comes to generating reports that different stakeholders need. Getting out of spreadsheets is not just making me as the ESG manager's life easy. It actually has these other efficiencies that we can gain. And the education piece, as you mentioned, is really important. So many organizations no longer want to feel like everything is outsourced to a consultant and that we don't really know what is going on internally. So rather than just pitching, let's get a technology system, no one really believes most of the time that the technology solution will solve everything. It's like bad data in, bad data out. We've all heard the more crude analogy of that. It's about asking for resources to upskill the team and the jobs to be done in those platforms, so that there is actually robustness around the data that we're now dealing with in a more automated dashboard way.
I think there's some key points in there, and I would definitely echo that. What we do see, there's a strong move away from that third-party consultant approach where we'll just get a third party to do their magic. We'll get a spreadsheet back with a pie chart, and there we go. And there's a total lack of understanding of what it actually means you're getting back, how it's been done. You might get some methodology with it, but there's no capacity or capability building around that at all. So every year you're reliant on something, a bit of a black box exercise that sits at arm's length. If you get questions, you don't know how to answer them, so you bring your consultant back in. And a lot of people do want to move towards understanding the streams, in this case, streams of carbon that are associated with the business, monitoring them, but also from a more strategic point of view, those big kind of objectives and targets, net zero, you really want to own that. You can't just measure once a year third party. You need to actually be on top of that. The same as you don't once a year look at your financial streams, your financial account, and you're monitoring that very closely and checking that. So I think with a lot of these things, technology has a real place there. And it is that approach of, can we replace spreadsheets with something that's dedicated for a job that we can train our people on and really own that piece of work? So there's a lot more we can talk about this slide, but I do want to move on from here.